So continuing on with more things that you can do with tuples and more ways that you can use tuples. The first thing I want to look at is how tuples are ordered. And it's an ordering known as a lexicographic or dictionary ordering. And essentially what you do is you go through and you compare the first two. If this one is less than this one, then tuple 1 would be less. Otherwise, you go on until you find two that are not two of the same index. They're not the same. So the 2's are the same here, the 3's are the same here, and here we get to index 3, and the 3 and the 4 are the different. So the one with the lesser value in this place is going to be the tuple that is less. So it's just like having a dictionary ordering. So in this case, tuple 1 should be less than tuple 2 in this case, and I print out tuple 1 less than tuple 2 lexicographic, and if it turns out that I'm wrong, then I'm going to print uh-oh, and so I run this, and it does print lexicographic. If I change this to a 5, then we get the uh-oh, so it means that tuple 2 is actually less than tuple 1. Now, again, it starts at the beginning, so if I put a 0 here, then it doesn't matter what happens after that. So these can be relatively large numbers out here. So the 200 is greater than the 2, the 300, the 3, the 500 is greater than the 4, and the 21 is greater than 0. But it compares these first two things, and this 0 is going to be less than 1, so tuple 1 is going to be less than tuple 2. And something more familiar. We had a list of characters. Then which word comes first in the dictionary, cook or cool? Well, again, you compare these, compare these, compare these. Those are all the same, and then you get to the K and the L, and cook should come first. And it does. If I change this to a D, I get a word duck. I don't know what that means, but it's going to be second in the alphabet from cool. Now, what if I come out here and change this so that there's only 3 elements in this list and 4 elements in this list? Then this one being the shorter list, and they're equal up until the end of the list, this one will come first. Okay, so there's a neat trick you can do with this kind of ordering. It's called DSU, decorate, sort, undecorate, and I pilfered this almost verbatim from the book, unapologetically so. So I have a list of words, hello, world, Python, GitHub, PyCharm, and I want to sort them, not in alphabetical order, but sort them by the length of the word. Now, some of these have the same length. So, for example, hello and world are both length 5. Python, GitHub, both length 6. So let's see what happens here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with an empty list and build a new list. And the new list is going to be all the words in the old list appended with the length of the word. So I'm going to print that list out. And then I'm going to sort that list, but I'm going to sort it in reverse order so that the greatest thing's at the beginning. I'm going to print that out again. Now these two prints are unnecessary for this to function, but it just kind of shows you the structure of what's going on here. And then finally we're going to build up another list, because right now what we have is a sorted list, and sort is a built-in feature for lists. It's a built-in method, I should say, technically. So we're going to build up a new list, but this T has not just the words that we passed in, but it also has the length of the words. So we want to pass back just the words, but in the order that we're looking for. So I'm going to go back through So now we're doing a for loop on a tuple, length and word in T, and we're going to build up the list res by appending to it just the word, and so we're removing the length of the word. All right, so T, again, is a list that has a bunch of tuples in it, and the tuples are word, the length of the word, and word. Let's run this. Here's initially what T looks like. You have Hello World, Python, GitHub, PyCharm in the original order. And what we've done is made up a tuple, and that tuple just is putting the length of each word in with it. So that's this print T here. Then we sort it in reverse. Now, the way the sort works is these are tuples. So it compares the first elements in the tuple. So it compares the lengths of the word and sorts on those. And then if you have those two equal, so in this case with Python and GitHub, the two of them are equal, then it's going to go in and it's going to compare the word Python with the word GitHub, and as strings, it's going to sort those in alphabetical, or as mathematicians would call it, lexicographic order. So we get this ordering here, and then we build again our list, where in this list we do a for loop going through the original list, T. And this is sorted in reverse order because we use this optional parameter, reverse. So we've learned about optional parameters, and sort has one. And we build up this last list that just has the words in the order that we are looking for. So it's called decorate, sort, undecorate, because what we did is we took the original list, we decorated it using the parameter that we wanted to sort by, the length of the word. So we decorated by adding a bunch of tuples. Then we did the sort, and then here we undecorated by removing the tuples and just coming back to the original list that we had, but sorted in the order that we want. So this can be a useful technique. Another useful technique for using tuples, and one of the previous videos, we made a min-max where we returned a tuple, and the tuple, one was the minimum value in a list and the other was a maximum value. In this case, I'm going to write a little function minimum, and Python's going to complain at me for doing this because there's a built-in function minimum, but it's going to have to live with it. And the trick with this one is, I'm going to just return the minimum, but I'm going to have a variable length parameter list. So up until now, we have always used a fixed length parameter list. You had to know if you're going to pass in one argument, two arguments, three arguments, and so on. But it turns out that if you put a star in front of arguments, it's going to treat this as a tuple. And we can pass in a tuple. In this case, I can make this list of numbers as long as short as I want. And this is going to go into args. This is a standard usage of args when you're passing into a function like this. You see this in a lot of different programming languages. And so I can store a list of any length here. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. So the minimum of the length 1234 is 3. I better put my space in, or I'm going to get a pep. And so what happens is you pass this tuple into args. You have to have the star here for this to work. And then inside your function or procedure, you just use args like any regular tuple. So I can get the length of it. I check to see if the length is greater than 0. If it's not, then I don't return a minimum. And then if the length is greater than 0, I do the standard minimum argument that I did in that previous example. I set the minimum to be the first thing in the tuple. We do a for loop through the entire tuple. And if the minimum is greater than the current element of the tuple, then you reset minimum to be that element, and then return minimum. All right, and the last example of using tuples. This is kind of a neat example. This is something called zip. So I made up a list of heroes and a list of their sidekicks. And I had to throw in the Doctor and Rose Tyler for my daughter, who is an absolute nut for Doctor Who. And then with these two tuples, and you can do this with a list, you can zip them together. Now, in Python 3, when you zip these two lists or tuples together, you get something called an iterator. So when we print out duos, we're going to get something a little bit odd. We're going to talk about what iterators are very soon. So we're going to postpone that. But the cool thing is, with that iterator, you can make a dictionary out of this. So what this is going to do is it's going to pair these things up. So it's going to pair Batman with Robin, Lone Ranger with Tano, the Doctor with Rose Tyler. That's basically what zip does. And it's going to make a dictionary out of the two. Now we can print that dictionary out. And there's lots of uses one could use for this kind of thing. Another example is you could have first name, last name. So that gives you an identity for a human. And then we can pair that up with their social security number. So I'm going to zip the first name and last name together. And then I'm going to zip that with a social security number and make that into a dictionary and print that out. So let's take a look at what that looks like before we get into the last bit of this. So I zipped together these two tuples and called a duo. I printed duos, and what you get is zipped object at, and it gives you an address, and that's really not terribly useful for the kinds of things that we're doing. But then when I make that into a dictionary, you can see that we have the heroes as the keys and the sidekicks as the values. So this would be kind of useful. I mean, you can maintain the two separate lists and then put them together. And here, you can have the first names and the last names, put them together to form a person that becomes a tuple, and then that tuple becomes the key for the social security number. Or actually, you could do this in reverse and maybe make the social security number the key for the person. So what I've done down here is an interesting little for loop where, again, first, last is a tuple. You have to think of this as one thing. Don't think of it as two separate things, first and last. This is a tuple. And we can then have that tuple iterate over this entire dictionary. So this is the Social Security database. It's a dictionary. And then we're going to print out the first name, the last name, and using this tuple as the key, this will print out the Social Security number. So we go over this list. We get Jim Bob's Social Security number is 01, Jane Bob's is 02. Oh, you should know that in calculus, when I make up examples, I always use the Bob family: Jim Bob, Jane Bob, Jill Bob, and Joe Bob. And then their uncle, who's a little more formal, instead of being Fred Bob, goes by Fred Robert. And apparently they were born really early in the United States history, so they are the first 5 citizens of the United States to receive Social Security numbers. All right, so as I said, in the next chapter, when we get to chapter 13, we are going to look at the difference, or when one might use a dictionary versus a list versus a tuple. There you go.